Hello, true creatives, and welcome to another very special episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm thrilled to have back with us today Todd Henry. You may remember Todd's previous episode where we talked about the motivation code. You may also know Todd from his work writing books such as Die Empty and Herding Tigers. But today we're talking about his new upcoming book. It's called The Daily Creative, and it's all about daily practices that can help you really bring your best creative work to the table. Todd, it's wonderful having you back today.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. So we talked about your history last time. Let's get really down into the meat of it today. You've got a new book coming out called The Daily Creative. What's it about, and what sort of things can we expect from it?
So over the last couple of years, many of us have been trying to figure out new ways of working. Obviously, we had this little thing called a global pandemic that none of us expected to have to experience in our lifetime, or at least hoped we wouldn't experience. And I think for many creative pros, we were not only having to deal with the struggle of the work, getting the work done and the uncertainty of the work, but also the uncertainty of our work methods, how we were collaborating, how we were interacting with one another. And I think because of that, my experience has been that a lot of people have felt a little bit like they're drowning, not really swimming. Usually we can swim in the tide when it comes, but I think people felt like they were drowning. And the last thing you want to do when somebody's drowning is toss them a 300-page manual about how to swim. And so as I was considering my next book and what I might want to do with the next book, I thought, really what would be useful to people in my experience over the past couple of years is a daily actionable, practical guide to help them be prolific, brilliant, and healthy every day. One quick idea. Who has time to sit down and read for hours every day? Some of us do because we love to do that, but not everybody has the time every day to do that. So I thought, well, I'll just write a book with 366, because of leap year, distinct ideas and actionable insights that people can digest very quickly, consider, maybe do some reflection on, do some writing on if they want, and then apply that day in their life and work. And the great thing about it is, at least from my perspective, is that every time you read the book, it's going to mean something different to you because you'll be in a different place as a professional. So you might read the same entry twice and have a completely different response because of whatever's going on in your life and world. So that was really my ambition, was to write something that would feel like a companion, like a daily companion for people as they strive to do better work each day.
I can attest to the power that you can get from books or journals where there's just a very short amount of time to do a very particular task. And my wife and I did the 5-minute gratitude journal for quite a while, where you write down 3 points in the mornings and 2 points in the evenings, and it takes 5 minutes to do. But it's that act of actually getting into the habit and repeating the action that also triggers a mindset shift. So what sort of things are you actually going through in the Daily Creative?
Well, to that point that you just made, let me reiterate that, or sort of reinforce that point with an insight that really kind of drove a lot of what we do in the book, which I'll answer next. And that is a quote by Gretchen Rubin. She said, "What you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while." And I believe that to be very true, that what you choose to do every single day provides the foundation for all of your ambitions, collaborations, work, leadership, whatever you have to do every day. Those daily disciplines are what set you up for success. So we primarily focused on 5 key areas, and this is really the 5 key areas that I have been teaching about for the last couple of decades in my work and all of my other books. This is my 6th book. And those 5 areas are focus, relationships, energy, stimuli, and hours. So focus being how we allocate our finite attention to the work and how we define problems and then attack those problems every day as creative pros. Creativity is problem solving. So if you have to solve problems every day, congratulations, you're a creative professional. But with that comes a lot of uncertainty. And so how we define problems, and how we allocate our attention is really important. So that's focus. Relationships is how we connect with others and how we leverage others in our pursuit of our ambitions, how we lead, how we collaborate. Energy is how we manage our ability to bring what Lewis Hyde calls emotional labor to our work. So this is things like how we prune unnecessary activities, priorities, commitments from our life, and how we pursue productive passion to give us energy, a deep well of energy for the work that we do. Stimulus, those are the things that go into our brain that form the sparks of creative intuition in our life. But some of us are less than purposeful about how we build stimulus into our life. And so there are many entries about building effective stimulus into our life and ways to kind of spark ideas. And the final one is hours, which is how we allocate our finite attention. Many people think about their time in terms of efficiency, but not in terms of effectiveness. So some of the principles in the book or some of the entries task people with making time investments. You invest your time in this area this week, things that may not pay off for maybe days or weeks to come, but they're important investments for us to make. So those are the 5 key areas. And those were the 5 elements of creative rhythm in my first book, The Accidental Creative, and really have carried over through all of my other books as well as a framing tactic. But those are the 5 key areas: focus, relationships, energy, stimuli, and hours.
So I'm now trying to imagine if we've got these 5 types of topics, how this relates to daily practices, as you talked about at the beginning. Take us through some examples of how this is structured, because if I'm thinking about a book where I'm given something to think about every day, if I'm going through a creative process, there might be some days when certain activities are more appropriate than others. So if you're at the beginning of a journey, it might be more about ideation or refining ideas, but at a certain point, you might need to get into the thick of actually producing and being productive. But you said that every time you read this book, every page should make sense at that point in time. So how is it structured to actually relate to something you should think about or do on that day?
Yeah, so there are a lot of entries, several entries that are what we could call maybe 50,000-foot entries, which are, let's think about your life and your work in the grand scheme of things, and let's talk about your overall approach to your work and how you're organizing your life. Those would be sort of like higher order types of entries, but there are also some very practical, tactical entries that are designed to help you spark an idea. So for example, hey, do this exercise to spark an idea today, things like that. So none of us, or well, I should say very few of us have the luxury of only working on one thing at a time. So, while we're working on the final stages of one project, we might be at the very beginning stages of another project, or while we're maybe mid-career, we might be starting a new relationship that is, sort of affecting us in other ways. And so the entries are designed in the book to be such that really, regardless of where you are in your life, your career, whatever stage of project or work you happen to be in, it's something that you can think about that day or apply in some way. Or if you're a leader, that you can teach to your team. It's designed to be something that will meet you where you are. And we wanted to be very intentional about that, making certain that it didn't feel like any day's entry was kind of a waste. As a matter of fact, some of the early thinking we had was, well, let's do a week on focus, then we'll do a week on relationships, and what we realized is that's not terribly helpful to people, because if people don't feel like they're struggling with focus at any given point in time, they're just going to kind of skip over that week. I mean, why would I read this if it doesn't seem relevant to me? We wanted each day to feel like they were unwrapping a package. It was kind of a surprise to them. What's today's entry going to be about? And it would spark some kind of new connection, some sort of new insight, because it caught them by surprise. And surprise is a very important tactic when it comes to teaching and leadership, and often a very effective tactic when helping people apply what they learn. It makes concepts much more sticky.
One thing I like about you and your work, and obviously I did mention at the beginning, Todd's got one of the best podcasts about creativity on the internet. So if you like this one, you'll definitely like Todd's Accidental Creative podcast as well. And one thing you often talk about is creativity isn't just about having ideas and being imaginative. It's about doing something with those ideas and being creatively productive. So what is the outcome that you're hoping this book helps people achieve? Is it overcoming barriers that they might have, or is it the kick in the pants to actually sit down and do the creative work that's inside them? Or is it about helping them on one specific creative project from start to completion? What sort of things is it going to help actually help people achieve?
Well, I would say the answer is yes to all of that, but let me put a caveat on my response because I know that it sounds like it's trying to accomplish everything, which it's not. The book really is designed to create a cadence in people's life where they are thinking not just about the work, but about how they're doing the work. We often talk about, think about, discuss, collaborate on the work itself, but we don't step back to look at process. We don't think about how we're approaching the work. Well, that's where we typically get ourselves into trouble. It's not usually that we lack the talent that we need or the drive that we need. We don't always lack the resources that we need. What we do struggle with very often is process. And the reason is we become sloppy. Over time, we begin to shoot from the hip. We rely on talent. We just show up every day and expect ideas just to come because they've just always been there when we need them, and they're just always going to be there. And thus, we're not intentional about how we structure our life or our process. And we don't talk about how we're doing the work. And so this entire book is really about process. It's really about how your approach, little things that you might be doing that could be impeding your ability to produce great work. So let me give you an example. One of the entries is about unnecessary complexity. We don't realize how easily we can slip into a place of unnecessary complexity, meaning we add layer upon layer upon layer, commitment upon commitment until we feel strangled. And we don't understand that. We don't realize it until we need to be able to deliver, and suddenly we can't because we're jumping over 7 hurdles just to be able to get to the point where we can do the work because we've made things needlessly complex. That's something you're not going to just suddenly have an awareness of on your own. You're not going to wake up one day and say, I think my life is unnecessarily complex. I think my process is unnecessarily complex. Maybe you will, but it's unlikely that's just going to spontaneously happen. The book is the catalyst to force that conversation. Hey, have you made your life unnecessarily complex? Is there any place in your processes where you're throwing hurdles in front of yourself? Or if you're a leader, is there a place where you're putting hurdles in front of your team that are unnecessary? How can you simplify the process so that you can spend your finite mental cycles doing the work itself? That's one example, but process focused conversations typically don't happen in organizations, or when they do happen, it's we're going to blow everything up and start all over again. And because we know it's not working, but we don't know why it's not working. Instead, what we want to do is create a cadence where, and by the way, I already have many teams that are going through daily creative on their own as a team, meaning that they are having a cadence of conversations about the same topic. So today we might be talking about unnecessary complexity. Tomorrow, maybe we're going to talk about how we're resolving conflict on the team. The day after that, we're going to talk about how we generate ideas. The day after that, we're going to talk about whether we're spending our attention in the right places and how we're defining problems that the team should be solving. So they're reading the same thing. They're having these conversations day after day, and it's all designed to help them improve, get a little bit better each day together as a team. That's really, when you ask, what was I trying to do? That was the objective with this, was to create a community of thousands or tens of thousands of creative professionals, or even more, who are all having this cadence of learning, application, conversation, day after day, and we're all reading the same thing at the same time, which I think could be really exciting, including me, by the way. I wrote this book because I need this book. I've been going through it every day since I wrote it. I've had early access, of course, but the reason being, these are all things that I need to think about in my life and work as well. This isn't something I'm just lobbing out there to other people. I wrote this book because it's the book that I need to help me stay prolific, brilliant, and healthy.
I love this focus on process because it's not just around creativity. It's anything that involves creativity, especially innovation as well. There's so much bad advice out there about what's important and what's going to help you overcome those hurdles. And a lot of it, if you really boil it down, is nothing more than a bit of motivational speaking. A lot of it's around you can do it, or here are some techniques to generate more ideas. But very little of it actually goes to the next step of, okay, but what do you need to do something with those ideas? And that's where this focus on not only how to overcome the challenges and the barriers through process, but also, as you said, the cadence and the practice. Seth Godin talks about the practice all the time. And it's what distinguishes someone who is imaginative from someone who takes those ideas and actually produces something, even if it's not perfect at the beginning, And chances are it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be pretty crap to start with. But
Right.
what's your process to take that and turn it into the next version, or edit it and refine it and improve upon it? This combination of divergent and convergent thinking that's required to make anything great. Sorry, that me just going on a little ramble there, but while I was listening to you, I was, especially at the end there, hearing you say, this is the book that you needed right now. Why do you think over the last couple of years, there's been something to drive you towards creating this type of book? It's very different from your previous books, which have been very much more around helping individuals and teams do their best creative work in much more of a long form fashion. This sounds like much more sort of short, syncopated daily advice. Has there been something since the pandemic or before the pandemic, or something in your life that made you think, now's the time when I myself or the world needs this different type of book?
Yes, there are a couple of things. First of all, you probably, like I, have noticed that our attention spans are decreasing. People are very easily distracted by whatever the next shiny thing is. Um, and that's not to belittle anyone. I think it's just a function of how our culture and our technology has shaped our attentiveness. And so, we could shake our fists and be upset about that, or we could say, all right, well, how do we meet people where they are and help people still accomplish what they're trying to accomplish? I think I mentioned if people are drowning, you don't want to throw them a 300-page manual about how to swim. You want to offer them some quick, practical, actionable advice, like paddle your hands and move toward the boat. Well, that's really what this book was designed to do and to be. And mostly because what I've discovered is that people aren't lacking advice. There are so many books. There are phenomenal books out there. And I've read, and I'm sure I know that you have as well, so many of them. Could never possibly read all of the great books that exist out there, but I've read so many of them. You can see some of them over my shoulder now. And they're all great. They're all wonderful. And they take hours and hours and hours to get through, and then hours and hours and hours to process and think about how to apply, which is great. And I still do that. And I advise anybody to do that because it's the best way to grow in your capacity to commune with great minds, as Stephen Sample from US, former president of USC, called it. We need to commune with great minds in order to shape our own perspective, our own thoughts. And at the same time, what people often lack are those easily accessible and actionable nuggets and reminders of things that maybe they already know, but they've forgotten about. And so this book is really a book of, in some ways, a book of reminders rather than brand new concepts. So as an example, I write about stability and challenge in herding tigers, and the importance of stability and challenge to the life of creative pros, and bounded autonomy being important when you're leading teams of talented creative people, which is great. And then the rest of the book basically funnels up into that. And I spend 300 pages describing ways in which that plays out. On a daily basis, really what we need to be reminded of is, hey, stability and challenge are important to us. Is there any way right now in your life where you lack the stability, the clarity of process, clarity of expectations to accomplish your work, or where you lack challenge? Are you feeling stuck? Do you need to take on a new project? Do you need something to spark your creative ambition again? That simple little reminder in a 250-word essay, and then an actionable challenge like, hey, go talk to your manager about ways that you could, take on a project to spark a new sense of challenge, or go talk to your manager about the fact that you need clarity of expectations. That's really useful to people. And the good part is they don't have to go read a 300-page book to get there, right? It's just a really simple reminder and a very practical action step. So that's what I was trying to do with this book, is just remind them of things they probably already suspected or knew, and then give them something really simple that they can do about it, rather than saying, hey, go read my book, Herding Tigers, read all 300 pages, and then figure out from that what you think you need to do next.
Obviously, I'd recommend you do anyway. I mean, all of
Well,
Todd's
of
books
course.
are fantastic, but let's keep it focused on the current one. It's interesting you talk about people's attention spans decreasing and decreasing, because a lot of people would assume that that's the case with the rise of short form video and TikTok, and all of that. But there's something else that I've seen over the last couple of years, and it is pretty directly related to the pandemic. What I've seen is related to the conversation of the Great Resignation a while back, and not necessarily people just leaving their jobs, but worldwide, when this huge pandemic hit and working structures changed, where sometimes people were either laid off or put on furlough or working from home for the first time, in many years, questioned what was really important to them. And a lot of people during this time, I think, asked themselves what creative output is inside me that I have been either keeping back because my real job was more important right now, or is just something that they want to consider thinking about. And for a lot of people, I think that really feels like drowning, like you talked about at the beginning, because this wealth of options can feel daunting and overpowering if you don't know either should you pursue something like this, or which of the 20 different business models could I think about, and of each of those, which of the 30 or 50 different ways of promoting it am I seeing being promoted on the internet? And people are exasperated not knowing where to start. And I think that's where sometimes having a process, even if it's not the perfect process, any process that makes you make progress is better than analysis by paralysis and not knowing where to start. Have you seen anything similar happening like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, no question. I think that it is especially the case with people who are newer to the marketplace, where they feel like they have to have everything figured out from the very beginning. You know, I can't take a job that I don't know is perfectly suited for me, perfectly aligned with my ultimate life ambition. You have no idea what your ultimate life ambition is when I mean, I say this as a father of someone who's in college right now, right? Like, he has some ideas of what he's good at and what he might want to do, but I would never suspect him to know exactly what he wants to do or where he wants to be 10, 15, 20 years from now, right now, when he knows the least about himself that he's ever going to know. And so, to your point, what we have to do is throw ourselves into a process, throw ourselves into a role, start adding value, pay attention to what we're doing, pay attention to places where we seem to be adding disproportionate value, and take notes on those things and learn about ourselves and add as much value as we can. And as we do that, we learn in the midst of doing, not the other way around. You don't figure it out and then go do it. You do, and you discover passion, you uncover passion in the midst of doing things, not sitting around thinking about things.
Speaking of learning by doing, you mentioned at the beginning that you're eating your own dog food and you're going through the points in the book yourself. Yeah. While you were planning and drafting these points back when you were still in the writing process, did you surprise yourself in any situations where you thought, oh, I would have expected this to be easier for me being a creative professional? Maybe I've lost touch with part of the process, or I've just got comfortable in parts of the process and I needed something to trigger the beginner's mind again. Were there any examples in your own work that you were surprised by?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that one of the things that was sparked in me through this whole process was a reimagining, and one of the entries is actually about this, a reimagining of what it is I'm trying to do in the world, and what kind of container I'm going to need for the things that I'm trying to do in the world. It was a really interesting insight that I had. I realized that really the last couple of decades of writing long form books, I mean, this is my 6th book, right, with a major publisher. So, for all of these years of writing long form books, it was great. It was wonderful. But I realized this might actually be the best summation of my work and also the most effective and practical tool moving forward. It really caused me to rethink how I present ideas into the world. I've been podcasting since 2005. So 17 years now, I've been doing a podcast. That really is my native format, is, short form, quick, accessible ideas. It's different every week. It's a new topic. It's something different. that's what I've been doing for 17 years. Books really are sort of the anomaly for me, which is, every couple of years I write this 300-page thing that's all about one topic. And so writing a book that feels much more like a series of podcasts is probably much more of my native format. And so that was a really interesting insight for me. I don't know that I will write another 300-page book. My future books might be shorter form factor. They might be more like this one, where you're kind of bouncing from topic to topic. I really don't know, but that was a big insight that I had, and it was sparked by one of the entries in the book about containers. And I realized, oh, I might maybe, as much as I've loved writing those other books, and I think those books are, I think, in my humble opinion, those books are certainly worth going and reading. But I think it's really sort of raised a question for me about what the best container for my work is moving forward. And I think we all can ask that question. I think we all should ask that question pretty routinely.
I know that especially when you're running your own business as someone who produces things for a living, you're an example of someone who has, over the last couple of years, experimented with a series of different form factors and packages and containers, as you said, for how to run your business and make money. I mean, you've got the work you do with publishers where it's more of a traditional writing application. You've got podcasting as well, and you've also got premium podcasting. And maybe there's some other things behind closed doors, speaking events, workshops. It seems like you have put a lot of value on diversifying your, not just creativity, but the outlets and the business aspects of it as well. How's that working for you, and where do you see the future for yourself?
Well, it's like anything else. Some things work really well and some things don't work as well, but you have to try a lot of things to figure out what's going to work best. And I think people often don't try things because they're afraid they're going to fail. And that's the only way that you learn is by trying a lot of things. The core part of my business is teaching and training. I spend most of my time working with companies or speaking at conferences, speaking at events. That's the biggest part of what I do. And so, as you can imagine, in 2020, that was kind of turned on its head when suddenly we can't get into rooms with 1,000 people anymore. That sort of changed my business model quite a bit. And I had to make a big pivot to virtual speaking and training, built out a studio in my office, and basically ended up doing a full form TV production every time I present to companies. But now that's become another, arrow in my quiver, so to speak. I'm doing a lot of in-person speaking and training now over the coming months, but I'm doing probably just as much virtual training and speaking, and not necessarily because of the pandemic any longer, but because now that's become a viable way for companies who either are remote or maybe can't afford to bring me in person to have me participate in their event without the need to, fly me to California or, Canada or, the Philippines. I can now still be a part of their organizational event or a part of their conference without needing to be there in person. So, it's really interesting because I had shunned virtual presentations for years and years and years because the core part of my business was in-person training, in-person speaking. And I thought, well, this is not good. This is going to cannibalize my business. What I've discovered is that it's actually opened up brand new opportunities in terms of who I can communicate with and where I can be. I did an event in Chicago a couple of weeks ago where I was doing a full day workshop for a company. They broke for lunch. I did a 45-minute virtual presentation for a company in California over lunch, which both parties knew, by the way, but I set up my entire studio in this room, right? It was actually a basketball court at the Chicago Athletic Association. That's where the event was being held. I set up my thing. I did a 45-minute virtual presentation, tore it down. The other company came back. We finished the workshop. I was able to do 2 events in one day, which there's no way I would be able to do that otherwise. So I think it's interesting how the pandemic forced innovation in a lot of ways, in a lot of people's business models and how they think about things. And this virtual speaking or virtual training thing is one example of something I think is not going to go away anytime soon. But that's, to your point, a part of that diversification. It's finding other ways of connecting with people and opening up new revenue opportunities that were unavailable really even just a couple of years ago.
And speaking of keeping on diversifying, keeping moving forward, if people want to find out more about The Daily Creative, the book, I I know that it's coming out very soon. So depending on when you hear this, you might still be in the pre-order window or you might not be.
Nope. It's out today.
It's
It's
out
out as we're
today.
speaking. Yes. So as we're speaking, it's out today.
Oh, excellent. Well, in that case, I can only reiterate, Todd does amazing work. If people want to find out more about this most recent amazing work and the book, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
So the book is available anywhere books are sold. So it's called Daily Creative. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to toddhenry.com. There you can read all about my books and all the other things that I do. Or you can go to dailycreative.net, which is where you'll find more about Daily Creative.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get all of those links down in the description below. Todd, as always, it's been wonderful having you here, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.